Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good morning, everybody. My name's Rhonda Smith, and my company, Minerva, is very pleased to welcome you to the second of a series of 4 webinars we're doing around focused around the topic of sustainability, and we're organising across 4 different sectors. And today's is looking at the charitable sector. And of course, charities are businesses in their own right, in the sense that they have to maintain the sustainability of their own vision, their own services, their own premises, if that's how they operate. So big challenges in terms of sustainability. Next slide, please. So sustainability in the time of COVID-19 is driving, if you like, a new normal. We know that we have the opportunity now to actually think and to act differently ourselves, but also I think everybody is aware that perhaps as communities and as nations, hopefully, there is wider citizen and customer awareness of the implications about the way we live our lives and the way that we consume. And there is a tangible shift in values and expectations, which all of us as individuals and as managers or owners of organisations and businesses really now have to take into account. The massive change regarding the lack of travel, the lack of, could you go back 1 slide, please? The lack of travel, the lack of, if you like, the opportunities to go out and explore, to go out and shop, if you like, is causing us to actually think very differently. And there are benchmarks, of course, against which we can look at those changes, and that can anchor, our ideas about sustainability in the mainstream and for our own purposes. Obviously, at the very global level, there's the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, which provide a very strong anchor for that. And of course, the big challenge of climate change will hopefully lead to a rethink about where our priorities should lie in terms of innovation and developments. And of course, at our own personal level, our own well-being is to the fore, physical well-being, but also mental well-being. And that well-being obviously impacts on your own organisation, on the people that you work with or the people you manage, and of course your customers or your supporters if you're in the charitable sector, your fundraisers, the people who have actually been helping you, who perhaps have been a little bit in the background. Within that wider context, of course, of sustainability of the planet and hopefully our ability to actually think differently about how we can actually manage that. Next slide, please. So I'm delighted that we have with us today 3 guest speakers who are going to speak about their own experience within the charitable sector. As I said, my name's Rhonda. Amanda there in her stripy t-shirt is looking after us on the technical side. And if you have any issues technically, please do put a note into the chat box, which hopefully you can all see, in order to see if we can help you actually with your audio or any other difficulties that you may have. But of course, throughout the presentation, you can also put in any questions or comments you'd like to raise, although we will have a Q&A session at the end. So also delighted, therefore, to welcome our guest speakers, Charlotte, who's going to talk to us about her work with ABCD Bethlehem, Tim Houghton from Community First, who many of you may already know. I can't see who's actually logged on, but I expect there's some familiar names in there to some of our speakers. And also delighted to welcome Lucy Johnson, who runs the Army Flying Museum at Middlewallop. So before we get into the actual presentations, I'd like to just ask you a question. So next slide, please. So a question for you in terms of, I beg your pardon, sorry, a question for you. Yes, what's been the biggest challenge for your charity or organisation during the lockdown? We've put some suggestions in here. So from your own organisation or your charity's viewpoint, what has been the biggest challenge for you? Has it been about continuing to provide the services that you usually provide and which everybody expects? Is it the fundamental question of loss of income? Is it more about the well-being of the staff, yourselves included, or indeed a team that you lead? Is it around actually how on earth do you manage the contractual obligations, perhaps around cancelled events, which could be a problem? And also maybe it's around actual management of premises, because some of you will be based in organisations that actually have large resources, large issues to deal with. So please do select the answer most appropriate to you. It could be one of those or could be anything else. And do please put your organisation and enter your response into the chat box. Give you just 2 or 3 minutes to do that. Do let us know if you're having any difficulty using the chat box. So we just have 2 responses at the moment, I think, unless, Amanda, I'm not seeing all the chat box. Okay. Okay. All right, we'll move on. So this is something that I think is useful for people to be thinking about priorities and about how they're being addressed. We only had a very small number of responses, it seems, but loss of income seems to be the biggest issue on people's minds. So we're now going to turn to our guest speakers and ask them some clear questions regarding their own experience from their own organisations. So next slide, please. So I'm delighted to welcome Charlotte Reid, who is a consultant to a local charity of ours, to ABCD Bethlehem. So thank you, Charlotte, for joining us. I don't know very much about this charity. I do recall seeing some publicity about it, possibly when it first started, but maybe, which is a long time ago now, seeing from the slide, 34 years ago, which is it's a great achievement in itself, actually, being able to work for that length of time. So this new normal that we find ourselves in at the moment must be providing very great challenges for ABCD Bethlehem. So what are the 3 biggest challenges that you are helping the charity to respond to and address in light of the current pandemic?
Yeah, well, the 3 biggest challenges are most certainly the lack of income, or the drop in income, making sure they can continue to provide the services they do. I mean, that really is the priority, because these children in Palestine are relying on them to get the treatment they need. So that is a priority. And also cancelled events. You know, as a charity, you organise events which involve people coming along, and obviously that's not possible at the moment. So some events have had to be cancelled, and it's about coming up with new ways of thinking, new types of events that suit the lockdown, to adapt to the current situation.
So what kind of alternative events or fundraising initiatives have you been able to support during this time?
Well, it's about trying to come up with ideas that suit the lockdown. ABCD is focusing on events that people can do from home. One example is they've launched a Bike to Bethlehem event, where they're asking people to help them make a virtual journey from London to Bethlehem, which is about 5,000 kilometres. And they can cycle it, run it, or walk it, and any distance they like in their own time from home during lockdown, whether it's a daily dog walk or a larger planned event, and they're sponsored. So it's something they can do in their own time. Another event is that they're doing a home-based quiz. So you can pay to take part in the quiz, and there are prizes on offer, but people take part from home. So it's about adapting the events to make sure that people can do this and take part during the lockdown itself, because we just don't know what the situation will be later in the year. So it's very difficult to plan future events.
Yeah. And is the charity at the moment really relying on their existing bank of supporters and volunteers and fundraisers?
Yes, they are. They have a very good band of supporters who are willing to go out there and actually take part in different activities, which is great. But they are reaching out to new audiences too. We know that giving is likely to be down. NCVO have estimated that for this current quarter, they think fundraising will be down by about 4 billion, which is very worrying. But it's the charities who are out there being seen, still working and doing the jobs people rely on them to do, that I think will get a share of that giving. They need to be visible. They need to be communicating with their supporters and with new audiences to ensure their sustainability.
So you mentioned their communication. So in terms of how perhaps you've had to adapt, the way that you're communicating about the charity, has that changed? And if so, how has it changed?
There is now much more emphasis on social media. More and more people are online during the lockdown. People have more time to spend on social media. So ABCD is focusing its efforts there. We are promoting our fundraising events on social media. We're also trying to engage with new audiences via social media. So it's also about trying to recruit some more high-profile supporters. We've just secured the support of the screenwriter and director Mike Lee, who's now supporting our charity, which has given us a big boost. So it's about trying to find new ways to reach new audiences as well as your existing supporters. And ABC is very much focused on doing that through social media and fundraising events.
So that has been with Mike Lee. That's a very good capture, I have to say. You said that you were trying to reach out to new audiences. Can you give an example of a new segment, perhaps, that you are trying to reach?
Yes, as with many charities, we are looking to engage more with younger people. I mean, that was the case before the lockdown, but is becoming even more of a priority. We need to secure the future supporters of charities. We need to be engaging with younger audiences. So videos and more engaging material has become ever more important. So yes, using videos and posting videos of the children that we're able to help in Palestine is playing a very important role in engaging with those audiences.
And really, I suppose the third main question, I guess, is obviously the heart of the charity is delivering those services, hands-on, in this what we will call a troubled area. So how has that been impacted in terms of that delivery, and have you been able to find any ways around that?
We have indeed, or ABCD has been very innovative in the way it has adapted. The charity funds various rehabilitation centres in Palestine, 3 of which are in refugee camps. Those centres had to be closed during the lockdown, so obviously the children weren't able to receive the physiotherapy in person that they needed. So the team in Palestine were able to offer those sessions remotely with the help of the families of those children. So most of the families have a mobile phone they could use. So by going online, the physiotherapists were able to guide the families through providing that hands-on therapy and providing information about exercises and learning. Many of the children have learning disabilities, so about different sessions they could do at home to keep that therapy going. And luckily the centres have now been able to reopen, but on a more limited basis. So they're now continuing with some in-person therapy in the centres and some remote sessions still online. But interestingly, peer support amongst the families is a crucial part of the service they provide. Normally the families get together at the centres, but they haven't been able to, obviously, during lockdown. So they've started a Facebook group as a way of enabling those people to communicate. And that's been a huge success. And I think that will continue after lockdown is lifted.
So that peer-to-peer support, and obviously what you might call training, you know, perhaps more formal training for the parents who are now having to support the children during this time, that'll actually be a benefit going forward.
Yes, I think having to be innovative and find new ways has actually helped them discover really effective new ways of communicating with the families, which, as I say, will continue, you know, in the longer term. So that's been a benefit of the lockdown.
Yeah. Charlotte, thank you very much indeed. If anybody has any further questions that Charlotte, that you'd like to address to Charlotte, please put them in the chat box or remember them for our Q&A session. Thank you very much, Charlotte.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. So next slide, please. So we're now going to turn to something completely different, the Army Flying Museum. And I'm delighted to welcome Lucy Johnson, who's the Chief Exec. Hi, Lucy. You must be pretty excited, a bit challenged, I suppose, with opening coming up.
Yes, very excited. I've got staff chomping at the bit, wanting to get back in. So the 13th of July is when we'll be reopening our doors. 13th
of July, right, it's in the diary. Good. So the Army Flying Museum, for those, just a couple of brief words. Those who don't know, based at Middle Wallop, of course, a very historic airfield there. The museum has very successfully bid for a National Heritage Lottery Fund. So if you haven't been to this museum recently, you must go, because it looks very different from perhaps the one you remember from your children going there maybe a few decades ago. So do put it in your diary, 13th of July, to go and see what's going on at the museum. So Lucy, I think I've heard or seen that you've actually been delivering some very innovative and creative ways to communicate during the pandemic, to continue to drive awareness of the new look Army Flying Museum. So what have you been up to?
Yes, so I mean, from our point of view as a museum, and I think the whole cultural sector, we're all dependent on people engaging with what we do. So actually shutting the doors and suddenly being cut off from everybody was a real shock to the system. So quite quickly we jumped on and thought, what can we do to keep our work going on? And we've had two really sort of strong programs of activities going on. The first one is our outreach program, which we were doing anyway as part of our Heritage Fund project, but it was all based on our outreach officer going out to groups, to care homes, to scout groups, to U3As, and doing sessions physically with them. And so within about 2 weeks, he'd managed to adapt that workshop to become a virtual workshop. And he just started putting the word out that we could do it, and just see what the take-up was. And so 30-minute sessions on Zoom, going through items in the museum, getting a few interactive activities going on, and then a follow-up activity afterwards. And he's managed to, I got the stats in this morning, over the last 3 months, he's done 227 virtual sessions with 6,000, just over 6,000 attendees, which is brilliant. And it's really opened our eyes actually to being able to spread the word, of what the museum does far wider than perhaps we could have done with our physical outreach program. Another program, another project that he has been doing alongside that, which was planned before lockdown, but has actually really neatly occupied some people during lockdown. And you can see the image in the slide below is our Pilots on Parade project. So the idea, we started asking back in February for people to knit us small pilots. And we put the patterns up and asked everyone to do them, and we've got so many, and it's fabulous. And there's such attention to detail. So all of people across the world have been sending us their knitted pilots, and Dan, our outreach officer, is going into the museum next week to install them all. So when you do come back to our newly opened museum, you'll be able to see all of these pilots parading through the museum, which will look brilliant. And then the other thing we did, which was something we've talked about doing for a couple of years now, I think, but have never got round to it, is our lockdown lectures. And the lockdown lectures came from one of our trustees, who lectures in the museum anyway, said, why don't we do this? We've talked about doing it, why don't we make it happen? We had a couple of really great volunteers in Clive Smith and Heidi Bowden, who said that they would help us with the technical aspects. And so within 2 weeks, we managed to get a 10-minute sort of potted lecture put together with Paul Beaver, our speaker, and then managed to do a live Q&A as well afterwards. And I think the live Q&A, particularly in those early days of lockdown, was so important for people sat at home, not engaging, not being able to have those physical contacts that we've all grown, that we're all used to. And so we have managed to do the live Q&A. People could type their questions in and Paul would answer them live, and we'd live streamed it on the website for free. And we did 6 of those, and they were really, really great. We got great questions coming back, we got really good views, and we did actually make some donations off the back of it, which as everybody will say, loss of income is the biggest challenge at the moment for us. So actually to have a bit of income coming in as well was great. And just to give you the stats for those as well, we've done 8 lectures now. We're into season 2, and the next one is on the 6th of July, but we've had over 7,000 views of those lectures, and from as far afield as I think Washington was the furthest I've heard yet, but we'll wait and see until the official stats come in.
So is this something that you're going to continue going forward?
Yes, absolutely. The aspiration we've always had was to live stream the lectures we do in the museum. Anyway, we have a monthly lecture night that are very popular, and so we've always wanted to do it, and it's always just felt slightly out of grasp, do we have the right capabilities, can we do it? And so this has really opened our eyes actually to, if we can do it this way as well, actually the two can work so nicely, both in our outreach program and in our lecture program, to allow more people to engage with the content at the museum.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you have actually achieved some income on the back of them, but I dare say that perhaps it hasn't quite reached what you would have hoped for. It hasn't actually plugged the whole gap.
No, but and I'm very happy to say we've made just over £13,000 in donations off the back of these activities. Now, of course, that's nowhere near plugging the gap of what we would have taken in visitor income over the last 3 months, but it does help, and that's the whole point, is with any of these leisure, visitor experience, hospitality industries, every little bit really does help to at least plug a small gap.
Yeah. And I don't know how many staff you've got, but I understand you've got a lot of volunteers, for example. And I think a key common concern of all of us, that run organisations and businesses, is actually, the well-being and welfare of staff and everybody. That whole team is a big concern. How have you managed this during lockdown?
Yes, it is a big concern, and I think with small charities, people do it because they love it. It's more than just a job, which makes it all the harder. So we've done regular emails, we set up some WhatsApp groups. I know the staff and the volunteers have their own communication groups as well that don't include me, and that's a really positive thing, I think, too. We've done regular Zoom meetings, we've done updates. I think the biggest challenge actually in doing these updates is that actually sometimes I've had to do them and say, I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do next. We've got lots of scenarios planned out. We've got lots of thoughts going on, but actually this is an unprecedented situation. And I think being open and being honest with staff makes it far easier when they're feeling actually a little bit like they're out in the cold. I mean, we furloughed 80% of our staff, and most of them are due to come back on Wednesday, at least part-time. But that's such a massive chunk of sort of the museum's family to just suddenly to just not be there. And the hardest challenge was to get them to stop working. There was no there was no problems there. They really, you know, they just all said, we just want to keep doing it, we want to help. So really keeping that communication open, you know, digital virtual coffee mornings, things like that, have really helped. And now I think everyone's just chomping at the bit to get back.
Yeah. Yes, because as a chief exec or, you know, leader of a business or organization, people are always turning to you for, you know, that answer. So that is pretty challenging in these difficult times, isn't it?
I think so.
So in terms of, obviously, the museum's sustainability is secured in the sense, hopefully you will be opening shortly, and I guess business will go back to a normal, sort of. But what is your new normal, do you think?
Yes, so our new normal is going to be quite different. One of the key things is that we've had to install a one-way system through the museum, and the refurbishment that we did as part of the Heritage Fund project was that the museum was free flow, so you could really sort of dip into all these different parts of the story in your own time, in your own way. And what we've had to do is install an absolute one-way system through to make sure that everyone can see everything, but without this crossing over. I mean, we're quite lucky, we're a big hangar, we know big open space, so actually capacity is not really an issue. But we are installing pre-booked tickets so that we can limit how many people are on site. We've had to take some of our interactives away because they're just not suitable really for multiple use at the moment. And so I guess our new normal has been actually to try and at least keep as much of the essence of what we do, of keeping it hands-on and allowing people to touch things and to get involved, whilst making it safe, and that has to be the bottom line. So our new normal is yes, it's going to feel a bit odd, I think, for everybody, but we are managing to reopen everything. Our shop is reopening, our cafe is reopening, and the museum will be open as well, and we will be doing summer holiday activities, and you will still be able to come and you know and touch these things and see the helicopters and get in them.
But people have to pre-book. Yeah.
They do, yes.
And you say the cafe will be open. That must be quite a challenge in terms of organising that.
Yes, absolutely. The cafe will be open. We're just going to do takeaway items to start off. You know, it's not a big cafe. We don't have a lot of space to be able to do the distancing. So we're just going to make everything really simple to be able to take it away. We've bought some new picnic benches for outside so people can sit outside if they want to, or go back to their car if they want to. But the whole point is that we do still have at least, you can come and have your lunch at the museum, and you can sit and watch the aircraft flying past on the airfield. And that was a really important part of getting the museum back up and running for us. And I think what's quite interesting, and I was chatting to one of my staff members this morning about it, is this notion of not rushing to failure, of let's get ourselves open, let's see how it goes. You know, everything is going to evolve so much over the next few months. Actually, we don't want to rush and get it wrong. We want to go slowly and steadily and make sure that everybody is safe and has confidence in what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. I guess one of the big things perhaps that's gone a little bit too out of focus is, you know, our concern about, you know, plastic rubbish and takeaway and things of that kind. Is that something you're taking into account in terms of sustainability of resources and managing waste, or is it something at this moment you're seeing as something that you've really got to just use the most what you can find as the most appropriate materials going forward?
Yes, it's exactly that. We have we always use compostable items in the cafe anyway, and we will continue to use those. We have, I mean, hand sanitizer was one of the biggest headaches, And I have to do a shout out to Hugh at Downton Distillery, who's providing us with big drums of hand sanitizer to use through the museum, which I'm really pleased with. So we've managed to get reusable plastic bottles so we can be topping them up, so we're not constantly generating waste that way. We are looking into the cleaning products that we're using. We're trying not to use thousands of wipes, so we're trying to get, you know, reusable materials for that. I mean, of course, some of it we can't avoid. We have got paper towels, you know, in the toilets and things. So it's not, we can't do everything, but we have made a real conscious effort to try and source locally where we can, to try and use reusable things, again, in a safe way.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that's going to be policy going forward, that you will perhaps put that higher on the list than perhaps it has been in the past?
Yes, and it's been on the list. Like everything, I think it's very easy to get stuck into a rut where things seem too much to change all at once. And actually, to look at a positive to come from this, at least it's given us a chance to step back, to start at a sort of baseline, and actually think, how can we do this differently? Is there a better way, a more sustainable way, just in all of our operations, so that we can move forward in a more sustainable manner.
Lucy, thank you very much indeed, and well, good luck from all of us with the reopening. And if you could stay online and see if there's any questions for you in a bit, that would be great. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, just a reminder, please put any questions that you might have in the chat box for any of our topics and our speakers. As we turn now to Community First. Next slide, please. Yes, so delighted that Tim Houghton, I hope that's how you pronounce it, Tim.
Yeah, well, it's Houghton actually, but that's fine. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah. Hi.
Yes, good. Yes, so Community First, and many of you, I'm sure, know of Community First, but maybe we don't know the detail. A provider of support and services across a whole swathe of Hampshire and possibly beyond, I think. And you work with many smaller organisations. So a lot of what you're doing, I guess, is helping to, if you like, arbitrate, support, you know, provide ideas, perhaps, or individual support to different organisations that are your members. And I know that during this pandemic, you've worked closely with the whole local sector, voluntary and community sector, signposting and supporting as many as you can. So 600 member organisations, is that right? Is that the correct number?
It's actually increased a little bit, Rhonda. We're up to, in fact, we'll be over 700. Partly because we have actually recruited a few during COVID, but also because we've managed to implement another merger during COVID. So from the 1st of April, Community First reach extended across the New Forest as well. Okay.
So how have you had to adapt your own plans then? That's a huge community, you know, the organisations themselves, who are then obviously cascading out and reaching a very diverse and very large population out there, some of whom I suppose we could call the most, some of the most vulnerable, you know, during this pandemic. So how on earth are you managing your plans and actions during this very strange time?
Yeah, it has been a strange time. It's been a real challenge. There's no two ways about it. But I suppose one of the advantages of having the sort of infrastructure organisation like Community First is we can act as that gateway to help statutory partners and engage and access the voluntary and community sector. And I think there were three key areas where we particularly kind of stepped up. One was to start with, it was all about linking vulnerable people with the local groups and volunteers to help them get help with shopping, with prescription collections, and to really try and tackle and reduce some of that immediate isolation and loneliness and uncertainty and fear and anxiety that people were feeling. We are embedded as an organisation in the Local Resilience Forum, which is the structure for managing the emergency response. And we work very closely with partners in Hampshire County Council to set up a central hub, and indeed with our district councils to set up and manage the local response centres. So people who needed help had a good central point of contact and could be signposted to the best assistance most quickly. but we spent a lot of time recruiting and mobilising volunteers. Again, one of our roles is as a volunteer centre and service. So this included placing volunteers into established voluntary sector groups where additional capacity is required, helping those mutual aid groups to recruit volunteers, setting up our own teams of local volunteers, particularly to manage some of the more complex cases and to deal with urgent requests. At the outset, we were getting a lot of requests at evenings, weekends for emergency food supplies, for urgent prescription collections, and needing to cascade that into organisations meant that we needed our own volunteers on tap. And we recruited over 1,000 across our operating area, and people were incredibly enthusiastic and keen to support. But I suppose one of the most important ways in which we adapted was the role in supporting voluntary sector groups. So our job was really to try and has been and continues to be to ensure the sector has the resources it needs to deliver that effective support. So everything from advice and support on safeguarding, DBS checking, risk assessments, very practical things. We suddenly had to organise systems around money handling, which reduced risks of contamination, things like fundraising, and helping groups to coordinate on the ground so they weren't duplicating unnecessarily. So some groups were really well organised and got themselves organised, or were existing groups that had good systems. Others were brand new and didn't really know what to do. But we produced things like volunteer packs and information handbook to help groups get up and running really quickly and as safely as we possibly can, without introducing loads and loads of additional bureaucracy, which was never going to be feasible during the pandemic.
Goodness, a huge agenda there, Tim, and remarkable results. I mean, 1,000 volunteers, and these are your own volunteers, I think I took out from that. Do you think they are going to stay engaged with you going forward?
I really hope so. Naturally, not all will. I mean, when you have something like this, you do get an upsurge, and not that we've had anything before and not got a lot of yardstick to measure against, but you know, in times of crisis, more people are willing to step up and help. What we are working on very hard now is to find ways of sustaining some of that engagement, to try and find meaningful roles, particularly around the kind of micro volunteering. What you've had are people on furlough, they've had more time, they've been able to pop to the shops while they're doing their own shopping and do a bit of extra shopping for other people. So it's not been, you know, a significant demand on their time. We've got to try and, you know, open the doors to new ways of encouraging some of those volunteers to carry on volunteering. We know that some will go back to work, but we hope that a significant and are planning for a significant proportion, given the right opportunity, to continue to volunteer. And there seems to be an appetite. It's really encouraging what volunteers. We've just concluded on Friday a major volunteer survey in partnership with Hampshire County Council and the University of Winchester, which will look at some of the motivations around people volunteering during COVID and their aspirations post-COVID. And we're really hoping I think we had around about 1,100 plus responses to that survey. It was on a county-wide. We're really hoping that will give us a steer, and indeed give some of our partner organisations and member groups a steer as to the sorts of things that people are interested in going forward.
Yes, there's so many charities, large and small and medium-sized. You know, the whole management of your volunteers is such a critical element, isn't it? And well, we've heard it from the other two speakers as well. Totally different charities, but also, you know, their reliance on people who want to give, who are interested in the topic or interested in their community. Yes, so that should be quite a positive then going forward.
Absolutely, I think it really will be. I think it's very hard, but there's a number of positives. It's a real kind of balance between the challenges that organisations and, you know, we've heard already, you know, in the webinar earlier that there are some real challenges for groups around finances, around sustaining that level of engagement and support from volunteers, from fundraising, from those donors and things. But there are opportunities for charities going forward, and that's very much what we're trying to. It's not necessarily about taking the positives out of COVID. I don't think there are any positives to take, but it's about recognising that it presents an opportunity, and our job is to try and help charities and voluntary organisations to maximise those.
So Tim, just as a summary then, if I were to sort of challenge you to say, you know, what are the 3 points that, you know, you're that your member organisations really should keep top of mind during this time, what would they be?
Well, I think the first thing I'd say, Rhonda, is to have a plan. I think a number of organisations have been saying to me it's so difficult to plan in the current environment. Our advice is make a plan, have a plan, adapt your plan, be flexible and don't be afraid to change it. But better to have a plan that requires changing than not to have any plan at all. Use the opportunity that COVID has presented to take stock and review what you want and need to do, and focus on how best you can deliver your impact. It doesn't mean that you have to restart everything that you had in place at the end of February that was put on hold since March. There may be some things that you want to use an opportunity to question whether you need to restart them. Is there a better way of delivering the impact for your beneficiaries? Secondly, I'd say communicate. Tell people what you've done, are doing and will do. In this maelstrom, I think a quiet charity can be forgotten, yet you may be doing some really vital work. So describe your impact and make it relevant, and keep it simple. We've seen some really good examples from organisations of sort of simple infographic sheets, information that can be shared readily with partners, decision makers, people who might have funding available and can see you on the radar as a charity who they might want to support. And the third key area, I think, for me, is probably around this spirit of collaboration. It's broken down silos to a great extent, COVID, given partners an opportunity to say, why didn't we do this before COVID? Why have we waited for something like this? We've got this energetic army of volunteers that we've already talked about, but we've got a tremendous will on the part of partners, both in the statutory sector, in the health sector, in the public sector, around local authorities, and indeed between charities themselves to work together. Try things, test things, find partners that are doing things that are similar to you or that you can offer as something complementary, test it with a partner. That would be really attractive to funders. So if you've got collaboration and a partnership opportunity, then you're more likely to access funding and resources. And again, it's about putting the beneficiary first. So put the beneficiary first, work together with partners as to how you can best achieve your objects and support those people who are most vulnerable at this time.
Yes, goodness, really, really good messages there. You know, have a plan, but don't be afraid to obviously look at it, try out and test things and change and adapt as necessary, really importantly. And obviously from Minerva's viewpoint, this whole message about communication, you know, I think I liked your phrase, a quiet charity can be a forgotten charity, and I think that's right. And it's not always necessarily the one that shouts the loudest, the one that shouts more effectively, you know, about, you know, the impact that you're creating, keeping that, you know, the end beneficiary or the end objective in mind.
I agree, Rhonda, and perhaps just to add to that, I think one of the things is, you know, we don't have all the answers, and nor do some of our partners. And I think we've seen through some of the decision making, or at least the way it's been communicated right from national government through local government, that people don't always have the answers. And actually, a lot of the answers come from intelligence on the ground, which is where the voluntary sector and charity sector come into their own. The answers come from those communities that we're trying to support. What's wanted, what's needed. Use that intelligence to inform those decision makers, and that's where we can help through the local resilience forum and beyond. So it's a real opportunity for partners to put themselves on the map.
Yeah, Tim, thank you very much indeed. Some great words there, great advice. Thank you very much to Tim. Thank you very much to Charlotte. Thank you very much to Lucy. Next slide, please. So this is people who are on the call now. It's your chance to ask any questions. Amanda, do we have any questions?
We do. We have a number of questions which I'm very happy to run through. The first is a question for Charlotte. What was the best new way of communicating with younger audiences, did you find? Did you find that video worked well?
Yes, most definitely, especially on platforms like Instagram. Naturally, you know, it's all about the images, and we're finding that we're engaging much more through the videos that we're posting, which are largely showing the work that ABC is doing. But interestingly enough, the most popular video we've had was a direct appeal from the chair of ABCD, explaining the situation. We urgently need support to be able to adapt our services and continue providing these services during the lockdown. And that had a huge impact, explaining the situation to people. We really do need your help, and we need it now. And that was a very effective way of engaging with new audiences.
Thanks, Charlotte. Next question, Amanda.
This is the question for Lucy from Hannah at the Houghton Conservancy. She asks, how did the virtual outreach sessions work in terms of numbers at each session? Did people log in individually, or were they done at schools or groups that were still able to gather together?
Yeah, we actually had them. Most of them were for people to log in separately, so they were sent round to cub groups or scout groups, and each child logged in from their own computer. But we did also do care homes, clearly, who are all living together as well. So it was a bit of a mixture of both, really, dependent on the on who the session was for.
Thanks, Lucy. Another question we have is from John Merritt from Social Enterprise Link, and he has asked all of you, really. He'd be interested to know if any of you think that you'll be able to be part of a bigger Build Back Better plan, or if you feel you'll need to focus on your own organisation and your local communities, users and customers.
So Tim, do you want to go first on that?
Yes, thank you, Rhonda. Sorry, I'm muting. And hello, John. John and I do know each other, and it's good to hear from you, John, and thank you for taking the time to join. So I think from our point of view, yes, it's exactly what we're trying to encourage. And I think particularly, I know John has a keen interest in social enterprise, and particularly seeing the enterprise opportunities whilst delivering social impact that can be afforded as a result of the sorts of issues we've been dealing with over the last few months. I think there's a real opportunity to bring organisations together. Of course, organisations need to focus on restarting services, ensure they deal with financial constraints and matters, but part of that solution can be through, and should be, I think, through collaboration and partnership working, playing to your strengths and weaknesses. And I'd like to see plans that are drawn up across a wider geographic area, but also through that thematic area. We're already doing some work with young people's charities to try and bring things together. We're already doing some work with organisations that are particularly targeted on working with those who are most vulnerable, to build kind of safe haven type approach so that organisations can, individuals can access services in one place. So there's a number of ways of thinking about things differently, and having organisations like John's and others focusing on social enterprise can play a big part of that.
Good, thank you, Tim. Charlotte or Lucy, would you like to contribute? Big point about collaboration.
Oh, sorry, my camera's not come on. I would just say that from our point of view, what's been again part of the process we've gone through over the last 3 months, I think the sector, the sort of cultural sector, has really come together anyway to help each other. It's quite a unique sector in itself. So actually, it's already starting. So whilst at the moment everybody is very, very focused on getting themselves open again and safe to bring in visitors, I think moving forward we are absolutely going to be looking at a far more collaborative way of working.
Thank you, Lucy.
Just to add to that, obviously the priority is to make sure that ABCD can fulfil its own aims and objectives during this time. But they're very much open to collaboration, so willing to move forward on any opportunities that arrive, to collaborate with similar organisations. That's always a positive thing.
Good, thank you very much. Amanda, do we have any more questions? Was that it?
We do. We have another one about, obviously, I'm sure many of you are aware, it's Plastic Free July coming up. And it's generally a question to all of the speakers. What are you doing for Plastic Free July? Are you doing anything for Plastic Free July? I know Lucy touched on it in terms of the reopening and what you do anyway as initiatives, but I'm not sure if anyone's got any comments on that specifically.
I'll just contribute from our point of view. We used COVID as an opportunity, again, in internal discussions with our staff team. I've got a staff team of about 120 and we're all disparate, so digital meetings were actually paramount. But a group of staff were really keen to use it as an opportunity to look again at our wider carbon footprint as an organisation and some of the benefits of using digital technology, reducing resource consumption. We have a number of services that do require quite a lot of transport and travel around the county, and including use of single-use plastics, including use of paper resources. What can we do differently? So we've actually, in the process of creating an action plan, which we're very keen to share with both CBSs in terms of those organisations advising other charities, but also indeed wider with charities and our member groups and trying to encourage them to do the same. I'd be really keen to know about what other organisations are doing specifically around plastics, and particularly we're very keen on campaigns that we can run in July, and be delighted to hear of other suggestions, and if we can help publicise those, then that would be great.
A great opportunity. Thanks, Tim. Lucy, do you want to add anything?
I think I said most of the bits earlier, and so I'm sort of conscious of time, I don't want to repeat myself. But similar to Tim, actually, I think what will probably come out of this is a different way of working, and I think everybody will pick up on different things that they can do, and I would be really interested, and I think that will become quite a hot topic over the next few months, of actually how we can work differently to be more sustainable. So actually, in terms of plastic free July, having just ordered a bulk load of plastic reusable hand sanitizer bottles in lieu of glass, you know, I think we are just going to try and keep it as low as possible, and just be really mindful moving forward to not overuse.
Thanks, Lucy. Charlotte, do you want to add anything?
Well, just to say, obviously, it couldn't be a priority for ABCD during the recent difficult period, but that's something that now, you know, the situation is looking a little bit more secure. I think that's something that they will be looking at very closely over the next few months. Good.
Thank you very much indeed to all our speakers, to Charlotte, to Lucy, and to Tim. Thank you very much. So we've recorded this, so obviously it'll be made available via Minerva's website, and obviously the answers to the questions too. So next slide, please. So just a little activity to round this off. We're asking you, if you wouldn't mind, using your phone, log on to a website. Could we have the next slide, please? Amanda, are you having a problem moving?
Yes, bear with me one moment. Charlotte and Tim, if you could stop sharing your webcams, I think I'll be able to then move on. Thank you.
Lovely. So just to close this off, if you wouldn't mind using your phones, I'm sure you've all got a phone. We're asking you to log in to www.menti.com. This is just a bit of software. Everybody can log on. You don't have to create an account, or nothing will be recorded in terms of personal details. And when you get into that website, you just need to enter the code 947129, as it asks you to do. And then we're asking you, if you wouldn't mind, just inputting three words that come to the top of your mind regarding sustainability and how that comes across for you in these challenging times. What are the challenges that you and your organisation are facing, and what words actually epitomise those challenges for you? This is to help us create a word cloud, which when we provide an email back to you with some feedback and links to the recording, we'll also share that word cloud with you. So I'll give you just a few minutes to do that. Put into the chat box if you've got any issues with that. We're asking this across all 4 of our webinars, and we will create a coordinated word cloud on the back of all the input from the people who've been on this journey with us. From Minerva's viewpoint, the way we work very digitally anyway, but the biggest aspect from a sustainability question from our perspective is the travel. We work with a lot of European projects as well as those that are homegrown, and of course that has stopped this year, and I think is now affecting people's judgment as to how much travel we do actually need to do. So we are hoping to be able to reduce our carbon footprint in terms of travel going forward quite significantly. Good, you can continue obviously playing with menti.com until you're finished. I think we just need the next slide, please, Amanda. So just to remind you that we're running 2 more of these webinars the next 2 Mondays. The first one is 6th of July with a focus on the hospitality sector, and on the 13th of July the focus is on the health and wellbeing sector. So we do hope that you'll be able to join us, and if you're on our list and you've given us permission to email you, then obviously we will remind you of those. So thank you to everybody who's joined us today. Thank you once again to our speakers. It's been very informative. Great to hear from 3 very, very different charitable organisations and how they've addressed these challenging times. Lots of lessons, lots of good advice, lots of good hints and tips in those contributions. So next slide, please. So thank you for joining our webinar, and look forward to seeing you next Monday on the 6th of July. Thank you very much indeed. Bye.